beautiful wines to look at in only an hour.
Masters of Merlot.
And so I'm going to go ahead and get us reeled in and begin. Constance gave me the job of starting. I'm happy to do so. A little introduction. Obviously, you guys are in the middle of the 2018 Wine Bloggers Conference here in beautiful Walla Walla, Washington. A place that I've only been in one previous time. I was so pleased to get to come back. I don't know if anybody's kind of local, but you guys have something really special here in southeastern Washington, and I'm glad to be here. Today we are exploring Merlot, and I was thrilled to see that this particular section sold out like that. So thank you guys for your interest in Merlot and in the two fine wineries that Constance and I represent. So I'm Kay Molaski. Yeah, that's me. And I manage trade relations and education for Duckhorn Vineyards, which is the one component and the initial component that makes up Duckhorn Wine Company. Duckhorn Wine Company, we'll talk a little bit more about what we do, but we are a company that has been deeply involved and very skillfully involved in the making of Napa Valley Merlot for 41 years. So it is absolutely the flagship varietal for Duckhorn Vineyards, and very appropriate that we would be here today to postulate for and cheer for and encourage the love and interest in this fine grape. Joining me today is Constance Savage, who serves as the general manager of LaCole Winery, just right up the road. And at LaCole, which obviously Constance will get more into, they also have a long and fruitful relationship with Merlot. So that is a way to begin. What shall we talk about next?
Sure, so I was going to say this is going to be very fun, and not only thank you for joining us, but congratulations on getting in, because we put up the seminar, the tasting, and it booked up right away. So good job jumping in. This is going to be really fun, and Merlot, if anything, is approachable and fleshy and juicy, and who doesn't like that? So we're going to really dive into Merlot, but we're going to give you some background on both Duckhorn and LaCole before we jump into the tasting.
Before we leave that slide, you guys, obviously, you're influencers, you're members of the media, you're bloggers. You guys are very much a part of our, let's make it a shared mission. We produce Merlot, but you have the ability to write about it, advance it, support it, cheerlead with us. So there is one easy to remember hashtag around which you can gather. And Duckhorn Vineyards was one of the instigators of a movement that's now in its 6th year, in which we are dedicating an entire month to a celebration of this noble grape. Merlober, if you like, right? I like the way that sounds. And we use the hashtag MerlotMe as a place to gather, to share recipes, to share food matching ideas, to post a picture of yourself with a bottle of LaCole with a thumbs up. And since we've been doing this, we started this process, started this hashtag in 2013. There have been over 56 million impressions gathered around that hashtag. So we did this to not dedicate a day, Chardonnay gets a day, nothing wrong with that, but how about a month? And so this event today happens to be falling in Merlober, and I just want to make sure to encourage your use of that. And if you tag us, if you utilize it, we have a very active social media presence. We'll get back to you, and it's fun, right? So just a word about what we're talking about there.
So that's who we are. That's our titles. Those are our titles.
Are we imposters? Do we match? I'm parting my hair differently, but it is me. I didn't bring that coat.
Yeah. So Kay's been with Duckhorn for more than 5 years, but has a deep wine history, restaurant, hospitality, all that. Very interesting. I met Kay last night and learned so much about your experience.
Thank you.
I'm so honored to be here with you.
Thank you.
And I just moved to Walla Walla 5 weeks ago to take the position of general manager at LaCole. I'm so fortunate for that.
Can you speak up? It's kind of hard to hear you.
Oh, should we kill that back air conditioner if it's giving you too much noise, maybe?
Yeah, it's pretty cool in here.
Okay. Okay. We will shout, and you guys just have to deal with it. But I've been in the business also for a while, for 23 years. Based in New York up to now. The producers that you'll be looking at today, obviously you know, are Duckhorn and LaCole. And let's learn about Duckhorn.
Sure. Who doesn't love a vintage photo, right? I got to back up so I can admire my founders in their youth. So this photo was taken, I'm going to say, probably within the first 6 or 7 years of business. Duckhorn Vineyards was begun in 1976 by a courageous, intrepid, I like to think somewhat dreamy young couple recently graduated from UC Berkeley named Dan and Margaret Duckhorn. Dan and Margaret chose to follow their interest in a wine country life and the idea of wine production, and they took that interest and they took it to the very infant, very babied Napa Valley. And what I mean by that is that at the time that Dan and Margaret are deciding they're going to be a winery owner in Napa Valley, do you guys realize there were fewer than 50 operating? Who else been to Napa Valley? Has the whole room visited my neighborhood? It's my adopted neighborhood. I've been there 21 years and moved there from Oklahoma and met these Oklahomans on the front row because we always find each other. So these guys, when they got started in Napa Valley, I just can't say enough to you how much it impresses me to think about having the ability to see around the corner and envision greatness before it was established. If 5 or 6 of us decide to try to begin a winery in Napa Valley today, it's a little different proposition, isn't it? Because now the Napa Valley, without a doubt, is the most well-known wine-growing region in North America, and certainly I think you could opine it's among the 5 or 6 most well-known in the world. But at this time, there was as much plums being grown there as there were wine grapes. So their idea to go to Napa, establish a high tier, and I don't mean that in an elitist way, but just as a statement of that dedication to quality, Dan was absolutely devoted to what we now call the luxury segment. He wanted to be in fine wine. And the varietal that he chose to focus upon happens to be what we're exploring today. He and his wife came by their love of Merlot through the expression of the fruit. As that slide said, it is supple, it's generous, it's fruitful, it's just doggone delicious. And Dan just simply liked it. If you want to hear from our founders, I would encourage you guys are all media people, there's a whole trove of videos on our website under Trade and Media. And don't let me tell the Duckhorn story, listen to Dan tell it. And what he'll tell you is, I simply liked it. And another thing that was different is that in that Napa Valley landscape, all of those producers, almost to the last man in the valley, were focused on Cabernet Sauvignon. So Dan very strategically, very thoughtfully determined that if we do something that other folks aren't doing, we have a better opportunity to be noticed. Plus, again, he liked the varietal. They'd traveled in Bordeaux. They'd had some very impactful travels on the right bank, and that cemented their love of Merlot. So we went after Merlot with great gusto, and primarily, can you back that up one slide for me, Constance? I want to point out that we don't always reach real far for names. I get asked this sometimes. Why Duckhorn? Because it's the last name of the people that began us. Her business's name is a little more interesting. We're Duckhorn Wine Company because we were began by Dan and Margaret Duckhorn. Our Merlot greatness is absolutely associated to our use of a vineyard called Three Palms. And I wanted to point out that Three Palms Vineyard comes by its name quite naturally. Oh, I don't have to put my finger up there. Oh, look what I brought from Napa. There are literally 3 palms standing in the middle of the vineyard. Wow. And this vineyard is north of our winery. The winery is on the corner of Lodi Lane and the Silverado Trail, just north of St. Helena. But if you want to go visit what I think of as kind of the soul of the company, you would go north on the Silverado Trail about 7 miles and turn in when you see the palms standing there kind of strangely in the middle of a vineyard. So Three Palms and Duckhorn are as intertwined as my fingers. We've been going to this vineyard with great success since first vintage in 1978. And on top of the Merlot program, we went on to do a few other things. That's another story. But today we'll focus on the original wine that Dan and Margaret put so much of their heart and soul into, which was the development of Merlot. This is you get an idea of my personality. When I see people out of their vehicles having their photo taken in front of this, I always honk and wave, right? Because I think I'm the mayor of Napa Valley, and I want to encourage them to come often, right? Have fun, take photos, come often. So this is a very, very famous bit of signage. It sits closer to the town of Yountville. It's on Highway 29. It was placed there by the Napa Valley Vintners, a trade organization that does such great work for we wineries of the Napa Valley. And yes, it is. It's the first AVA established in California, but not the first in the U.S. Who knows where that was?
Augusta, Missouri.
Joe Don, Tom Joe with the answer. It is true. The first AVA in the U.S. was established in Missouri. That's interesting. But Napa Valley is the first in the first in California. I've been noticing this of late, just talking to visitors at the winery. You know, when you look at Napa Valley and understand it's established in 81, but this producer is established in 76, we're older than the AVA. I mean, how OG is that, right? We're older than the AVA. And it is quite finite, not more than about 30 miles long and maybe 7 miles wide. Very easy to get around in, but an incredible amount of soils to be found. Over 100 soil samples can be found in this tiny little valley. And it's subdivided into 16 nested AVAs that exist inside the Napa Valley. I love this slide. This gets you an idea that this is when I go to work on Saturday. I won't parachute in. I'll drive in this road and park. But this is our main. We call this the estate house. Again, we're not the most creative with names. It sits on our main estate, and that is where we do the majority of our guest services. If you guys ever have a chance to visit us, I'm as proud of what we do in what I would call the front of the house. You know, we have wine makers, and then I think of the other folks who actually tell the stories, explain the wines, make the sales, give you your experience. Those are the magic makers. And I think we have the best magic makers in California. I really do. So if you come and see us, we'll entertain you in here, but we grow wine grapes on this home ranch. We have Merlot on this ranch, but this isn't the end of our vineyard ownership. We have, obviously, we're very, very connected to this iconic vineyard. Some would call this the equivalent of a Grand Cru if we use that terminology in the U.S. So the Three Palms Vineyard is north of us, closer to Calistoga. Stout, this is our outpost at about 1,800 feet of elevation up on the very revered sub-AVA of Howell Mountain. So we do grow Merlot on Howell Mountain on the Stout Vineyard. And then Pot Cimarron is actually at the base of Spring Mountain, kind of bumped up behind the very venerable Spotswood Estate, if you know who that is. So this slide is just meant to explain how much we dig it, because we grow Merlot on each of our estate vineyards.
Great, thank you, Kane. We will learn a little bit about Lake Hole 41 now. Great. So Lake Hole 41 is also a pioneer in its region. It was the third winery established in the Walwala, along with Leonetti and Woodward Canyon. So we're out there on the road when you came in from the Tri-Cities next to Woodward Canyon in Loudon, but they were established just the prior year, I think, than Lake Hole. And Merlot was a flagship wine for Lake Hole as well. It was the first wine produced, which was in the 83 vintage, and won a gold medal at the Pacific Northwest Enological Society. So Jean and Baker Ferguson knew they had something special on their hands. So this is Jean and Baker Ferguson, the founders. She was a high school home ec teacher, and he was a professor at Whitman College here of economics. So they both were teachers, and they purchased this old schoolhouse, which was built in 1915, and converted it to a winery, and actually went to live upstairs, built an apartment upstairs inside of the tasting room, which is the old schoolhouse where we work today. It's now our office space. So Jean and Baker Ferguson established in 1983 as a retirement project, basically, the Lake Hole 41 winery. Now their daughter, Megan married Marty Clubb. They met at MIT. She's from here. She was born and raised. She's a very important family in this town. She's the chairman of Baker Boyer Bank, which is one of the most important banks in the region. But she went to Whitman College and then went off to MIT for graduate school. He came from Texas A&M, and then they met at MIT. He was a chemical engineer, but he came back and started to, basically in 1989, they came back and out of passion and out of propensity for risk, apparently, decided to come back here. They were living in San Francisco in finance, in the finance sector. So now our third generation is already in place. not working day to day at the winery, but involved in the board and at showing up for all sorts of events. And I've met them several times, even though I'm only there for 5 weeks so far. And that's Rebecca and Riley. So Marty Club is there every single day. Megan, his wife, it's her parents who had founded Lake Cole. Washington State is a very special place for wine in general. Some of you are from Washington, so you know that. But when people, me in New York, or people across the country think of Washington, we think of Seattle and we think of rain and gray. But you will probably know that basically the Cascade Mountains, which are west of here, are a rain shadow. The clouds get caught there. They drop all their rain over there in cloudy west side, basically. And then across this whole open area, it's sort of a high desert. So we have a very dry climate, 6 to 8 inches of rain per year on average, coming at the perfect time. But the rain is not necessary for us to grow the grapes here because we have a very important aquifer underneath here, even if this is a desert climate. Very dry here. There's a map in your folder that I gave you that shows the map of Washington State where the Cascades are. Then we have the mountains that you've seen out here southeast of town or east of town that are called the Blue Mountains. And that's another place where sort of the clouds regather and we get a little bit of humidity. It's a little cooler here than west of here in the Columbia River Basin where it's even hotter. So our latitude here in Washington is we're basically on the same latitude as Bordeaux and, well, right between Burgundy and Bordeaux. So we have a great lumosity. We're very northern as compared to Napa, for example. So we have very long days in the summer. That latitude is just perfect for grape growing. The lack of rainfall I talked to you about already. The soil, our grapes here are on their own roots, and I'm not sure if you knew that, but it's something that some people know, some people don't. All of the grapes in Napa Valley are grafted onto American rootstocks. Here we're on our own rootstock, so even noble varieties like vinifera, like Merlot, is on its own roots. So that has a certain variable for producing the wines. It's also excellent if you have a deep freeze and the vine dies. You can just cut it off at the ground and it just grows right back up again, and you don't lose a crop. Our geology and soil is very interesting, especially in the Walla Walla for me. One thing I've learned, and this is in your folder also, is that we have 4 important soil types here in the Walla Walla. So the Walla Walla AVA wines, they have this, spice cabinet of different soils that our wines that we can pull grapes from. The newest AVA, the rocks of Milton Freewater, is basically cobbled riverbed. We have windblown loess, which is that fine, very fine, like flour practically, that blows around, and you might be here during a windstorm and see it in the sky. And then we have the alluvial flood silts that came from the big Missoula floods, and we have fractured basalt that is very deep. So many lava flows through here that at our Ferguson vineyard, which is in some of your glasses there, it's almost all basalt, fractured basalt, all the way up, 12,000 feet of it that goes down below sea level, and a tiny bit of dirt on top. So we have very interesting soils here that brings a lot of different characters to all of our wines, particularly our Merlot, which is a blend of two of those terroirs. Our philosophy on making our Merlot and all of our wines is small bin fermentations, good exposure to oxygen, punching down, a lot of cap exposure, punching down, gentle handling of the fruit, lifting and dumping as opposed to pumping. You don't see much pumping in our winery, and a lot of racking throughout the aging period. And we were comparing notes on our Merlot programs last night in terms of old oak, new oak, racking, barrel is very, very similar. It's very interesting. And even our blends in terms of the Merlot and the Bordeaux varietals in there is very similar. So it's a great opportunity to taste these today. So I think we don't want to waste time because we want to taste, but we want to show you the map that you have so you don't need to move all your glasses around. On the closest to you, on your left, is our 08 Lake Cole, and up to the left is the 08 Duckhorn. So those are the two we'll taste first and foremost. So I think we'll go from oldest to newest to the most recent vintage, and then we'll crown the tasting with the Three Palms Merlot, which is a special treat. We were so happy that Duckhorn was willing to pull out some bottles for us today.
We love to share. I mean, that's what it's for, an appreciative audience.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, we can jump into the 08 Merlot from Lake Cole first. So the '08 Merlot from Lake Hole was from the Seven Hills Vineyard only. So it's from it even on the label it even says Seven Hills Vineyard Estate Merlot. So that's the it's the flood silts, alluvial flood silts. So it has a more flowery, feminine. But now in the '08 you're having some secondary aromas. So very supple, spicy. We tasted it last week with our winemaker. And he said he thinks it's tasting beautifully now. There's a silky character. But what you'll find is there's a little bit of a dusty note. And actually you'll get that sometimes in Napa too, the sort of Rutherford dust. But I find that in the Washington ones. So enjoy tasting that. The floral is what I got to when I first tasted it. Even violets or lavender.
Forgot my thing.
Oh,
It threw some sediment already, so a lot of the tannins
Picked
have
up
dropped out of it. So you get more of just a silky feel. Not a lot of tannic grip, but still a lot of freshness,
Still there though.
crispness in the glass, and length.
I can't reach over there.
All right. No, there's not much in the library either, but
Preempting your question, folks, it's not for sale. Did you know this? I was wondering. Man, that is fantastic. I was talking to Constance and her husband earlier, and they were both talking about how they enjoy to show library older American wines to a pretty discriminating European wine drinker that they spend a lot of time with, to push back on the idea that American wines don't have aging capacity. So,
or that they haven't been always great.
yeah,
Because,
correct.
Yeah,
And
people-
and this is there's a great start for this. I want to I want to make sure to not go long or short. So should I talk about Duckhorn? Okay. So as we're going to do this so that we can we'll do kind of like crisscross and compare the same wine from two producers from the same year. So with this beautiful wine from Lake Hole in your mind and mouth, you have the opportunity to go kind of directly above it and drop into what we did 2 states away in Napa Valley in 2008. I want to mention something that we point to as an example of why we have earned such a reputation for consistency and dependability. We are on our 41st vintage at Duckhorn Vineyards. We started the 2008 harvest on August 14th, and this makes harvest number 41 at our company. In 41 years of winemaking, exactly 4 people have carried that title of winemaker. So that, I think that means, and it's almost like one of those great kitchens where a chef departed and the sous ascended, because each of those 4 winemakers, like looking at this foursome right here, they worked with the person that came behind them. So that means that there's an unbroken line of understanding of how we handle our ferments, how we handle our barrel program, those types of things. It's almost muscle memory that's built into how Duckhorn Vineyards makes wine. So this is the 2008. And this vintage, I kind of reminds me, I was there. This was one of those years whenever it was not necessarily that really warm, even kind of hot year, but this was this actually had a little bit of late rain to it. This required us to be kind of deft and nimble and make some picking decisions and do some things differently to be sure to sculpt this wine as skillfully as we did. When I saw the wines that we were going to pour, I was really happy this was going to pop up, because I've had this 2 times in the last couple of years, and it's always been just really extraordinary. So this is, like everything we do, this is 100% French oak was utilized in its aging. It saw about 16 months. We racked it twice. Yada yada. You guys see how you like this. This would have been bottled in May of 2010, so we're trying this with a little over 8 years of bottle age to it. When we make our Napa Valley wine, this would be a good point for me to make. When we make a wine that's labeled as Napa Valley, pretty, I suppose, fairly self-explanatory, but we actually are using vineyards in the making of our Napa Valley wines that literally span the valley. So there are fruit sources in this wine from the very south end of the Napa Valley, the closest to the San Pablo Bay, and that would be the AVA called Carneros. I know, like I saw a lot of hands. Everyone's been out in my neighborhood. So you would get a different style of fruit from the Carneros area, and we really like what happens when that meets fruit from more mid-valley areas in Rutherford, up into St. Helena, and then of course you saw our high elevation vineyard on Stout, and then Three Palms at the top of the valley near Calistoga. So this is a summary. The winemaker at Duckhorn Vineyards, who's been with us now for 13 years, is named Renee Airy. And she always says that she's looking to try to express the valley. When we try our Three Palms Vineyard Merlot, as it explains, it's a portrait of a single site. So this is 2008 Three Palms, Napa Valley Merlot, and much as Constance said about her own, this is beginning to just show some of the kind of tertiary aromas that are going to start to develop with a little bit more age to it. I was looking, some of the ladies looking at color. Our wines hold, I think, really, really well. You're not really seeing terribly much fading, and it had through really basically no sediment. So I think it's obviously in very, very good shape. The aroma here is maybe a little more, I don't get that lovely floral tone that I got over here, but instead I get more, maybe more plum, red fruit, and that's pretty typical for where we tend to go to in Napa.
And that's a youthful note too.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
He's so funny.
What's the alcohol level of the
On the Duckhorn, that's going to be, I'm going to guess right at, it's at 14.5.
Ours is 14.5 as well. Yeah. So we can
We're off to a good start, everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Fun, right?
You're not sorry you're not at the, you're going to a tasting right now? Okay, good.
Rub it in, right?
No, and nothing against Uruguay. Nothing against Uruguay.
When we were pouring our wines, I said, I hope they opened those Uruguay wines like 4 days ago.
Oh.
And just like spin them for like a solid day. So we'll move on to the 2012 Lake Cole, which is right close to you, right in the center. Tom Joe already has it up. So our 12 vintage, it was a big yield here. It was normal heat conditions, basically. So this is kind of like a classic vintage for here. The 12 vintage, though, we get to start seeing the Ferguson vineyard in there. So it's 75% Seven Hills Vineyard, which is what the 08 was. Plus there's 25%, roughly 26% of Ferguson Vineyard. So Ferguson Vineyard is one of the highest elevation vineyards here in the Walla Walla. It's fractured basalt all the way down, so you get grippiness and structure and more muscle and more dark fruit in our Ferguson Vineyard wines. And so 26% of it is in here. When we go to the 15, it'll be 50-50. So you even get more towards the Ferguson side. But this one is showing more tight, more young. It's not showing as many secondary aromas when we tasted it last week and today as well. It's still cherry and grippy. It still has a lot of grip to it. And I won't say which is my favorite of the tasting, but I really love this 12. But Merlot is an excellent grape. I think we can agree.
As Constance mentioned, I spent 10 very formative years in restaurants. So I think if you spend that much time always in the front of the house, I can't taste wine and not start thinking about food. I bet I'm not the only person in the room. So as soon as that kind of took a tour around my mouth, and it's this time of year, I want a fatty cut of beef, a beef short rib against that strong tannin would be so very good.
Thank you for that suggestion.
You guys have this? Is this available?
12, there may be some available.
Did you
We
guys
don't
hear that?
show it. We don't put it out there
okay,
too much.
fair enough.
We have more than the 08 on that one.
Fair enough.
She's only been there 5 weeks.
And it was also a bigger
We're
harvest.
trying to help her sell some wine.
Yes.
Price point on that one?
These are I think they're about $38. Am I right? Yeah, about 36, 38. Yeah, especially this current vintage, the 15. Yeah.
Are
Sir?
they comparable price points, or are they?
No, Duckhorn is more high end than Lake Hall, and I think that's something to do with their
41.
track record,
Yeah.
their name, their image, and Napa on top of everything. You know, Walla Walla makes wonderful wine, but it's definitely not as known, not as globally known as Napa. And there's a different style of wine. I wouldn't, you know, I don't think it's worse wine. It's a different style
Oh,
for
okay.
sure.
Yeah.
But Walla Walla does not demand the prices generally that Napa does, and Duckhorn is the top of the heap in Napa for sure.
Thank you.
Sir?
What's the, between two of your wines tasted, what's the difference in the old regimen?
And they're practically the same, 100% French oak, and 40% new, and 60% neutral or older. Yeah, second or third pass. So
Because
we-
2008 is still
of the Lake Hole or of the
Lecoq.
Of Lake Hall.
Talking about
Okay.
you were 8 versus you were 12.
okay.
The 12 is a lot fruitier.
Well, it's a bigger wine. Generally, it's going to have just more going on, and it's still all tight and held together. But that Ferguson brings just this extra structure that is going to hold it up, I think, a lot more for a longer period of time. Seven Hills Vineyard is a softer, more supple, more charming and floral sort of wine. So it's not going to just be tight like this as long as the 12 will be. I think the 12 will outlive from its start the 08. The 08's wonderful, and I love that silky, more developed style where the 08 is now, but I think the 12 will take longer to get there. Yeah.
So meanwhile, south of here in Napa Valley in 2012, some of you very well either have written about this or perhaps read about it. But 2012 is one of those years in Napa Valley that becomes kind of a critical darling and is proclaimed as practically perfect conditions. We are rather spoiled down there. Unlike some parts of the world, we really do get a very kind of predictable bud break. Very rarely, we saw some this month, but very rarely any late season rains to really throw you into chaos. So we have a very kind climate and condition aspect in Napa Valley as it is, but then every few years things seem to really come together and you get this just superstar vintage, and 12 was one of those years. We still have folks coming around the winery looking for anything from this vintage, and of course the 12s have been gone for some time. We don't hold much back either, which is why I was curious about what Nicole's program is. So I haven't had this wine in probably 3 years myself until I opened it at 2 o'clock for you guys. So this is our 2012 Napa Valley Merlot. Very much think about how I explained the 2008, because it's also a combination of vineyards through the valley. Our own estate fruit is here at a good proportion, but this gives me an opportunity to just kind of give a shout out to contracted growers, some of whom have grown for us for as long as 15, 18 years. And so going back to those same dependable sources and then building the wine around a core of our own estate fruit is how we would come to this. So I think this has sort of the shoulders and the heft that's often associated to Duckhorn Merlot. We do, and we humbly, accept the responsibility of being, for many people, the standard for domestic Merlot when it's done as well as this. So a Merlot done this well should have precision and have that spine of sort of strength running through it, but then also have that appealing fruitfulness. Again, I get a lot of plum from this, kind of a little bit of that kind of, maybe like an herb Provence, kind of a lavender quality to it. Same program on oak, and at this point, the winemaker that's in place now was taking a larger role in this wine. She was assistant winemaker in 12 and winemaker by 14.
Oh, wow.
What vineyard is your 12?
So that's built around a core of our own estate vineyards, places like Stout up on Howe Mountain, but it's on a single vineyard wine. That's our Napa Valley Merlot. So it takes a village. There are our own vineyards in that, but then also some of those, like I say, the unsung heroes that take our instruction and collaborate with us to grow fruit that we need.
Thank you.
You're welcome, of course. How's that striking you guys? How's that 12?
That's really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Almost as good as Lacoste.
Well, good.
Thank you.
It's funny.
We'll move on to the 15, and
Like they got them both.
we threw together, or I threw together a quick slide saying, on current releases of Merlot, what are you looking for and what are you not looking for? Because you can't really talk about that with older vintages because you get the secondary and tertiary aromas. But for new vintages, new Merlot, fresh, you're looking for a lot of wonderful things. It's not just plum, and it's, there's a lot of things. So these are some descriptors or flavor descriptors from some of the best Merlot that you'll find out there. And I think you're finding that in some of these. And what you are trying to avoid is menthol, tomato paste. Ugh, you don't want something too simple, too tart or bitter cherry, or mulch. You want some earthiness, but not like a horse's.
Right.
But so I just want to throw that in there. Our 15 vintage is coming from one of the warmest vintages on record in Walla Walla up to that time. So it's a very ripe wine, and the berries were very small in that vintage. And generally our Merlot berries here in Walla Walla are small. We can manage that because we have no rainfall. So Merlot will really respond when it has water. It will plump up, just like the wine you think can be plump and juicy. The grapes can be very plump if you're not careful. But here we have no rain and everything is managed by drip irrigation. So we generally manage to have small berries. So we have a lot of skin. There's a lot of wind here, so our skins are thick. So we get a lot of body in our Merlot here. And the 15 is a very good example of that. A warm vintage, small berries, a lot of skin, thick skin. And we get this very lush, more structured. This again is 50-50 in terms of Ferguson and Seven Hills Vineyard, so you have even more grip coming from the Ferguson. And this 50-50 mix is where we stand and where we will continue to be on our Merlot estate program. Those are two estate vineyards for us, the Seven Hills Vineyard and the estate Ferguson. So you might find, you can take your pick from those of what you might find in here. But there's even more. Obviously, you will find other things in there. You might find nutmeg and cinnamon. That's the wonderful thing about wine, is you find your mood affects what you find, but you can find things that are real to you. Coffee, we were getting a lot of mocha and coffee when we were tasting them, and I was getting that today when I was pouring as well. I'm not spitting that out. But it also has that freshness, and that's coming from the Ferguson vineyard with that deep basalt. The grapes come up with a high natural acid on picking from up there. Even though they're very ripe, there's still a lot of natural acidity from that type of soil. I'm very excited to taste the 15 of the Duckhorn as well.
So from tasting behind us, which is always a pleasure, I'm very fortunate in the work that I do. I get to work with the wines of the current day all the time, and then a few times a year there's these moments where we get to go backwards. Last year at this time we had a very large, really beautifully done event at Duckhorn Vineyards to celebrate those 40 years of winemaking, and I got to be on the selection panel that tasted wines from 4 decades, right? To be able to put things together that would show our expertise and our dedication over 40 years. So occasionally we get to go to the Wayback Room, but I encourage us all to live in the present, right? Because tomorrow might not come, and yesterday's too late, however the lyric goes. So this is the 2015 Napa Valley Merlot. Wherever it is that you call home, this wine is in stores and restaurants where you live. And I can say that with a certain confidence because, and I had a manager who used to say, it's not bragging if you can do it. So when I say that this is truly the most popular Merlot in the U.S. at its price point, that's just simply fact. So this is out and about. Restaurateurs love to carry this. This wine was really built in some of the fine kind of steakhouse traditions of the U.S., and it remains a staple. But it's always a wonderful time to meet this wine in its current vintage if you haven't had this lately. This is a reflection of obviously the 2015 vintage and of the young lady I've been mentioning a couple of times today, Renee Airy, that is the winemaker at Duckhorn Vineyards. Just a consummate pro. Literally, I love this. Sometimes you hear that kind of that truism about winemaking is both a science and an art. Well, the person in charge of the wines at Duckhorn Vineyards is literally double majored in chemistry and art history. So I mean, she's a walking embodiment of this. So she's got a very deft skill, very, very precise palate, and can deliver Merlot that has power and intensity at the same time that it's graceful. This has nice kind of rounded edges to it. Very, very fruitful, but not jammy or sloppy. Very upright. It has very good posture to it, and it also gets me thinking about what I would want to eat with this wine. If you notice the blend combinations that we put on all of your mats, we do like to put Cabernet Sauvignon in the back seat supporting Merlot. I think that's something that we've always believed in, and some vintages will have a bit of Cab Franc to them as well. In this case, we are using Cab Franc and even a little Petit Verdot. What else do you want to know? This was kind of an earlier bud break, so this season kind of got off and running. What else would be important to know about this wine? This is at $56. If anyone's kind of interested in those kind of things, the 8 and the 12 are both gone, so it's kind of pointless to try to quote a price. But this is our current offering, available at duckhorn.com at $56, and we ship just about everywhere, including Oklahoma now. You guys enjoyed that? How's that strike you? You know, I would dare anyone that still insists on speaking sort of derisively about Merlot to try these producers and say that with a straight face. These are truly really, really beautiful wines.
World class.
They are. These are world class wines.
How many minutes did we leave to taste?
Oh, we're good. We're doing really well.
Yeah. So we could take questions now.
We could, and maybe I'll introduce what the Three Palms, what you should look for in the Three Palms, and introduce it properly, and then we'll just kind of like settle into we'll just chat. You guys want to chat? I'm in a chatty mood. I'm working in a chatty mood. So the Three Palms Merlot is coming from the same vintage as the Napa Valley. So if you want to just really kind of geek out here, which I mean, come on, y'all, you're at a wine bloggers conference, aren't I surrounded by them, right? If you want to put one in each hand, I really like to do that little compare and contrast. And look for what of the two 2015 wines from Duckhorn Vineyards.
It's your upper two right-hand corner on your mat.
So I have the Three Palms in my left hand and the Napa Valley in my right. Your choice how to do it. Yeah. But all I'm trying to do is encourage you to look for what they have in common, but also what happens differently. Three Palms takes a strong left turn and goes somewhere that is, I'm working on getting better at this. At 5 years in, I definitely have tasted plenty of our wine, and it's been a pleasure to do so. But we have a president and CEO that's just a terrific person to answer to, so to speak, just a really inspirational manager. And he's been with our company his entire working career. He says that his LinkedIn profile is really uninteresting. He has one job, right? and so when I taste with Alex, sometimes he'll try something, and it's very mercurial, but you sometimes hear things in tastings that I'm in, internal tastings, where someone will say, yep, that tastes like Three Palms. So I think that really does mark and identify the great wines of the world when they have a signature that the producer can identify, but then when it travels down to the consumer, well, now you're really getting into kind of a rarefied space. Yes?
Three Palms is vineyard.
It is. So this wine is a vineyard designated wine, and we do a couple of things to make sure that these are as easy to tell apart as possible, even packaging decisions. So the glass is just slightly different. We're doing different capsules, right? The red capsule identified. Here's a bit of trivia. We've only been using the same art on our bottle for 41 years. Who knows what breed of duck's on the label?
Duckhorn.
Ugly.
It's not ugly. What's the breed?
Mallard.
You get another pour at Three Palms. So the duck is a mallard. And so in the Three Palms version, see, it's double appellated. It's a Napa Valley wine, which is true of everything we do at Duckhorn Vineyards. That's all we make, our Napa Valley wines. But in this case, we're showing you this wine is probably from the Napa Valley, a multiple set of vineyards working together. Now we go to a single site, a soloist. This is an orchestra all playing in time together, multiple musicians. This is a soloist, one side allowed to sing by itself. And we've been letting this side sing by itself since that first vintage in 1978. It's another interesting thing about Three Palms Vineyard was the first wine we made in 1978. And with the exception of one oddball year, and I think it's 1980, we've made Three Palms Vineyard Merlot every year. And we actually offered the Napa Valley Merlot for the first time in 1979. So we did, there's been some moments in Duckhorn history where I like to say we've been on our left foot when other folks are on their right. Choosing to go into Merlot is an example of one of those moments that was not the popular choice. And leading with a single vineyard wine from Napa Valley when no one knew where Napa was, no one could pronounce Merlot, and Dan asked $12.50 for that original bottle, and that was at a time that there was barely a wine in California or in the U.S. that had cost 10. So there's some confident movements there, but you can be confident whenever you have confidence in what it was that you were offering. So I wouldn't call it hubris, I would just call it certainty.
Vision.
Yeah, vision, for sure. So this is the 15 Three Palms Merlot. I was in a meeting with Dan one time when he was talking about Napa Valley versus Three Palms, and one of the things he said is that, we started making the Napa Valley version so you had something to enjoy that was more open and more approachable and more unwound in its youth while you waited for Three Palms to come around. So if you're tasting these side by side, inevitably you're noticing that the Three Palms is it's definitely more tightly structured with a much firmer, not blocky or sharp or awkward, but more concentration. The soil on this site, what there is of it, is really, really lean. It's on a outwash of this area in Calistoga called Selby Creek. The vineyard is absolutely just covered with small pebbles and in some cases larger rock. It kind of looks like when we talk about the galettes that you would see in Rhone Valley, this does not look like that. So these vines are pushing really pretty far to find the water that they need. There's a certain amount of stress involved. And then there's a whole romantic story that goes back to when this vineyard was the home site that Lillian Coit lived on. And Lillian Coit is the lady that gave Coit Tower to San Francisco. So it's a really interesting part of Napa Valley history. And we became the owner of this vineyard in 2014. So now that vineyard, that historic, important Napa Valley vineyard is ours. So this is the 15, and of course it is the follow-up to the Wine Spectator's Wine of the Year, which we were very, very honored to be selected as the maker of last year. Yes, Miss?
So, I'm understanding that this particular vineyard was not owned.
It wasn't. For instance, like I say, the president and CEO I was talking about likes to talk about we dated it for 27 years, right? Because we were doing this relationship with a pair of brothers named John and Sloan Upton. And the Uptons planted it in 1967. We started purchasing from them in 1978. And that went through a couple of different reiterations until we became the only purchaser of the fruit, solo purchaser, and then we became the owner of the vineyard. So it went kind of like that. Yeah, it did.
What exactly you're
We were buying fruit for the first time from this vineyard in 1978. And that was the slide that Constance had early on that showed that when the Mallard, this is before he went on Atkins, as folks say, he was plumper, right? So he's been streamlined a bit. But I also, you taste everything with your eyes first. And I've always been really impressed with that bold choice of the yellow paper. If you think about it, on a crowded shelf of wine bottles, there really still isn't anybody in this paper. So so this is current vintage in the Three Palms Merlot. If you're holders of wine at all, I imagine some of you are, this is a terrific wine to put away and enjoy. Maybe I like this. It really, to me, it really starts to sing in about 7 to 8 years in the bottle. I recently had one at 20 years in the bottle, and it knocked me out. Yes. So on a vintage like this, 15 is actually kind of a shy vintage. It yields a little down from the certainly from the year previous. We're looking for about 3,100 to 3,500 pieces in a vintage. But then with the Napa Valley, using multiple sites, we can get closer to 25,000, and then that's something we consider around the U.S. So Three Palms is made in about a quarter of the size, but it's definitely worth chasing down. And it would be it's at 98 if you were to purchase it from us. 98. Not the 14, the 15 we do. This is that, girl, I got this right now, all day. All day. Duckhorn.com. You're welcome. Does the Three Palms Merlot strike you well? Is that a great expression of how Merlot is so happy in Napa Valley? We think so.
How does the winemaker decide he needs 1/2 of 1%?
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny?
Because I've never seen like.
Isn't that something? I mentioned she's very precise, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
It is, yeah, the same blend. It's 80-10-10, yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the 80-10-10, 80% Merlot, 10% Cab Franc, 10% Cabernet Sauvignon, it's just a successful blend for us. Our winemaker, Mike Sharon, has been with us 23 years, working with Marty Club. So they have, their model of what they're after, and we like to have a consistent, beautiful style year to year. And we're working with just 2 vineyards for our estate Merlot. So our fruit coming in is pretty much the same, with Mother Nature thrown in the mix. They're working with, as an orchestra, a whole valley to work with different growers and probably a big red wine program where a lot of wine can go. Ours is estate, it's 2 vineyards, and that brings that uniformity of the blend. It's a very, the vintages up here are very consistent. There are some that are a bit cooler. They can have a cooler harvest period like now, or a little hotter July with some heat spikes, but those heat spikes just shut the vines off for a little while. But generally, it's always dry, the fruit's always healthy. So we don't have the wet or moldy or something like that vintages here, which is a great benefit.
And I would say as far as cepage, we're interested in, it feels like to me, if you look back over 40 years of us making Merlot, you'll see that we tend to settle in at about a 85 to 89% range of Merlot in our Napa Valley tier. But on the Three Palms tier, it does tend to often be more Merlot. Like you see, this particular vintage is all the way to 90. What we don't do with any frequency, but every now and again we do, a quick comment, sorry, let me say this to you guys too, you might find this interesting. Duckhorn Vineyards makes these 2 Merlots, Napa Valley Merlot and Three Palms Merlot, that we actually put out into the world through restaurants and retail shops to share with appreciators. We make 4 others that are sold only through our very robust DTC program that are available to folks that visit the winery, are members of our wine club, that log onto our website. So I find that a real statement about our commitment to this. There are 6 Merlots inside Duckhorn Vineyards. And then if you add to that what we do with our Decoy label, which is another part of a very important part of our company, there's a Sonoma Merlot inside there. So that makes us 7 Merlots inside one supplier's house, and they're all absolutely fantastic and all different from one another. So we don't have, I like to say we have an idea of where we're trying to get to, as opposed to a formula that is required that we follow. So it probably does look, you're probably looking for a pattern in varietal usage that might not be there.
Yeah, I know, I was just wondering.
Yeah, certain vintages, Merlot will do better, Cab will do better.
Yeah.
In California especially.
Yes.
What about your canvas back?
Yeah.
I'm happy to get into that. I was hoping maybe you guys would like to know about what we are doing up here, because we're
I think he just told me what you guys just bought Costa Brown.
well, that's another story. Exactly.
He just told me that. That's great. I didn't know that.
So let's talk about canvasback though. Let's talk about the locally grown. We are. So we've been making Merlot since 1978, as I've said repeatedly. But I should remind you guys that first vintage when we made Merlot, we also made Cabernet Sauvignon. Just because the Valley had a lot more Cabernet producers in it didn't mean that we didn't also want to be in that category. So we've been building a very respected Cabernet program inside Duckhorn Vineyards that just runs right along with our Merlot program. We also have good success with Decoy's Cabernet in Sonoma. So why I'm telling you what we're already doing leads into why we came here. We came to this corner of Washington State because we wanted to offer a third way with Cabernet Sauvignon, and we're kind of exploratory by nature. I don't know if you recognize that we also have had good success developing a really well-regarded Pinot Noir producer in Anderson Valley in Mendocino County that's called Goldeneye. We also have success on the Sonoma coast, out past Guerneville, out in that gorgeous area of Seaview, producing migration, Pinot Noirs, and Chardonnays. So what I'm setting up here is the idea of a company rooted in St. Helena, Napa Valley, but we have strategically reached to other areas that are interesting to us and seem fertile to what we like to do. That brings you to Red Mountain here in Washington State. I mean, you cannot deny what's happening up here. I like to say we've had good luck being both early and right, and we believe that this area, you guys get ready for it. I mean, if you don't think you're known now, you will be. And we wanted to get here before it was all gone. And we hired a really, really wonderful guy that if you ever get to spend time with him, please sign up. If you ever see Brian Rudin as the speaker, R-U-D-I-N, you want to get in that room. He's born in Wenatchee, he's locally grown, and he is our founding winemaker with Canvasback. He is up to his ears right now in the 2018 harvest, and we made the first vintage of Canvasback, named for a duck. It would be found up in this area. We made our first vintage of Canvasback in 2012.
And Brian used to work at the production crew at Lake Hull. So
I forgot that.
One of his first work experiences was working in the production team at Lake Hull. So
So it brings us so
ties.
those are some of the reasons. The desire to have another. Carol, please, my hidden coworker who's been keeping her mouth shut all day.
One of the inspirations for being here, was absolutely wonderful. The winemaking philosophy, style, history, the way they do business, the way they treat customers and partners. They are one of the main reasons why we're here. And as a new entrant into a region, being early and right was certainly a good goal. Preceded us by 30 some odd years. But lots of times when you go into new wine regions, it's hostile territory. So certainly Henderson Valley can be described that way. Coming up to Walla Walla and being embraced by people who love wine and good winemakers here, that's been incredibly heartwarming. Thankful. I'm not even sure if this is legal, but like we need a place to pour your wines. We'll let you do it side by side. That's Debbie and Jamie, and it's so exciting to be a part of this community because of awesome winemakers with a philosophy of making great wine year in and year out. But that philosophy of a rising tide raises all boats is absolutely why we're here, and we want to support the community. So I can't say enough about the wines, and the people make great wines, right? And these are great people who come first.
thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. We have the Chief Marketing Officer of Duckhorn here with us today. We're so happy you're here. Thank you. So, any other questions? Because I think we almost used our time up. We could stay with these, we have 2 minutes left, but we could probably keep tasting through the wines, keep going back and forth, up the Lake Hull vintages, back and forth between us, up the Duckhorn. There's a lot of ways to taste this setup of wines, and it's a rare opportunity, I think. I'm really happy in my first 2 months on the job to have such an opportunity.
Look at you.
Yeah. Very lucky.
Here.
Pardon me?
And this one.
No. But my previous company, we were always involved with import, but I never did go. They didn't let me out. They didn't let me out.
Graduated, what did you? I went to 2 years.
Where'd you move from?
Okay.
New York.
Yeah.
This is a big change.
Oh,
It
we
is.
lived there for 10 years.
It's a wonderful change. And Neil was,
I lived in Burnsville for 8 and Duluth for 2.
my previous company is an importer where I was, and we used to import Maceto from Orvalio. It's one of the great Merlots of the world. And so it's just like,
That's funny.
5 or 10 amazing great
I caught
Merlots
it
of
both
the world.
of them. Caught it OU, caught it
Maceto and Three Palms was always there for us. It's like,
Small world.
world-class.
Brother and sister, so
Thank you guys. Have a great event. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. Masters of Merlot. Hello. 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 Hello.